Trump's executive order will fail. With all of the protesting that's happening lately, in UC Berkeley, New York City, Philadelphia, some of which has been peaceful and some not, there's a united voice that on the surface appears to be one of insistence that President Donald Trump repeal his executive order, which covers the recent travel restrictions from those residing in or traveling from one of the T7 nations: Sudan, Syria, Somalia, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Libya. While America is a nation made of immigrants and while we embrace other cultures, in many ways we are the world's greatest melting pot, every once in a while, for housekeeping measures, there needs to be a pause or a reset. Now is one of those times. However, some, to be specific, mainly the ones broadcasting anti-Trump Nazi rhetoric and placing crosshairs on images of President Trump, as well as those burning items in the streets or smashing windows or burning limos, you might not exactly feel this way. In fact, it appears that national security is not even on their radar screen. Those participating in those protests, or more specifically riots, under the blanket of the First Amendment's protection to free speech, fail to realize that those protections are afforded to citizens of this great nation and do not extend outside its borders. Moreover, there's a concerted and inherent risk, currently among many nations, to garner efforts to cause harm to the United States and Americans in general. We are, after all, on the same team, lest we forget. Despite the fact that as of this writing or in this video, there is a temporary restraining order on the travel restrictions, this is not a victory for those hoping to have porous borders and unrestricted travel into the United States. It is my opinion this has just paved the way for increasing President Trump's power, and this is why. Now, to begin with, you have to understand the executive order that he wrote stems from the Immigration and Nationality Act. That's the INA. It's been in existence since 1952. The act has been amended many times over the years, but it is still the basic body of immigration law. It's in Title 8 of the U.S. Code, and it's one of 50 titles that deals with aliens and nationality. And although it's correct to refer to a specific section by either its INA citation or its U.S. Code, the INA citation is more commonly used. But suffice it to say, national security is well codified within the United States Code. So let's move on to whether or not the President of the United States can lawfully execute an executive order that restricts persons who are not citizens of the United States. Well, the powers of the Office of President are generally realized to be, and there are 7, I'll just run down real quick: executive powers related to legislation, which is signing bills or vetoing them; powers of appointment, which are all the ambassadors and U.S. judges and other cabinet members; executive clemency, which is power of pardon; emergency powers, which is not expressly written in the Constitution, but the framers kind of give the presidency some leniency to take care of national emergencies; executive privilege deals with the president's ability to withhold information from the public and Congress and the courts in the event for national security measures. But foreign affairs is the one we need to look at, because foreign affairs, under the Constitution, the president is the federal official that is primarily responsible for relations of the United States with foreign nations. The president appoints ambassadors, ministers, and consuls, subject to confirmation by the Senate, and receives foreign ambassadors and other public officials. However, this is the key. Through the Department of State and the Department of Defense, the president is responsible for the protection of Americans abroad and of foreign nationals in the United States. So, knowing this, it is on the issue of foreign affairs that our founding fathers possibly took well thought out measures to ensure that the homeland would remain safe in a swift and unashamed manner. In fact, it's very clear that despite any regulations specifically granting powers to the president by Congress, national security was always meant to be part of the president's key functions. Let's review an excerpt from the Heritage Foundation. The president has the power and bears the responsibility to make tough decisions at a moment's notice, whether to trust fresh but uncertain intelligence, bomb an Al-Qaeda safe house, target a terrorist for drone attack, or arrest a terror suspect. These decisions are not subject to legislative check or veto, nor in an age where a rogue state or stateless terrorist group may threaten the lives of millions of Americans could they be if the safety of the nation is to be maintained. National security comes first. Without it, life and liberty are threatened and happiness is an impossibility. Therefore, as James Madison wrote, security against foreign danger is one of the primitive objects of civil society. It is an avowed and essential object of the American Union. End quote. Protecting the nation requires a unity of purpose and faculty, and it cannot be devolved to a committee or Congress. The framers of our country recognized as much, and their wisdom is our strength. The President, first and foremost, is responsible for ensuring America's national security. So it is without a doubt that national security is at the forefront of the Chief Executive Officer of the United States. And as you just read or heard, it goes back centuries. Knowing this, and given the political climate we are in, both within our own borders, with violence, rioting, civil unrest, looting, and beyond our borders, with Iran and North Korea test firing missiles regularly, and Russia and China hacking our cyber infrastructure, and probably a whole slew of items that are delivered to the President daily during classified National Security Council or Homeland Security Council briefings, here is the likely outcome of all of this political theater. First, the temporary restraining order and the executive order restricting travel from the T7 nations, even though there's no, quote, religious test, unquote, or other First Amendment violations. Well, that leads to number two. The Justice Department will appeal the temporary restraining order, which they are doing as of February 4th, 2017, which will either nullify the temporary restraining order in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, or the temporary restraining order will be upheld. On this surface, this will appear as a swift and rapid victory for those who embrace open borders and free travel and unchecked travel restrictions for everybody. However, it will ultimately end up going right back to number three, Congress. And Congress will rapidly mark up and edit the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA, in both the House and the Senate, quickly passing both versions of it in the 115th Congress, which recently reconvened. Any American who's paid any attention knows exactly where I'm going with all of this. Once the edited or marked up version of the INA bill is passed in both houses, it goes to number four, the President of the United States to either sign into law or veto. My hunch is that the edited and marked up INA bill will not be vetoed. This will grant the President the codified means to ban any person or persons or groups or any other variation thereof that does not meet a religious test or some other constitutionality issue. Thus, to the chagrin of many of those protesting, setting fires, and cheering the restraining orders, there is an end in sight, and that end will be squarely on the center of President Donald Trump's desk, whereby everything you have been protesting all this time will be signed into law. And that's how it's going to likely go. To those protesting or those on Team Resist, while those efforts being made might be done so in the spirit of checking our government, keep in mind that none of that matters.